Dave Sayers. I'm the Senior Director of Talent Development for Cortland. We're a multifamily development firm that's based in Atlanta. We have apartment homes across the United States, including all the way out to Phoenix, Arizona. Special shout out to my Phoenix friends. Yes, it is. And also in the UK. And so we're putting a footprint out there. We also do a lot of build to rent in the UK, things of that nature. So yeah, that's what it is.
Great, wonderful. So what challenges have you had in your role as you've been working kind of through your modern learning journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Cortland is a fast-growing company for sure. So when I started with them back in 2015, we were about 20,000 units. Now we're about 78,000 units. And so what does that mean? That just means a lot of growth. And so that we do that through what we call rehab or value add. And so we'll find a community that could need a little love, and then we'll touch it up, change it up, and then we'll increase the rents, of course, and then bring in the residents who want to live there. That also includes bringing in new teams to help, run those communities day in and day out. So there's a lot of protection and I would say optimism around our values and how we approach those with every single person that's a part of our team, because we are different than the average property management company that's out there. There are hundreds of them, and we are in the top 10, but we're not the biggest by any means. But we do like to think that we are different, and I will say I know that we're different from the other property management companies. The space is big. It's been around for a long time. It's very standard for what people do, and we're the disruptors, I'd say, in a nice way, of how we want to approach that, which is fantastic. And so as the company has been built from starting even in 2005 to today, it's been a constant growth of starting a management field, starting a construction team, starting a design team, all from the ground up that our leaders have done, which is an amazing feat in itself for sure.
That's phenomenal, and a lot of growth in a short period of time.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the one thing that I think, kind of relates to the whole change management piece is, as a company like us is growing, and I know I'm not the only person out there that works for a company that's under growth at this point, and as I'm saying this, I'm hoping that some people are like, oh man, I'm feeling what you're preaching right now, is there's a lot of initiatives that get put together because every department wants to feel like, man, I'm bringing value to the growth of this organization because it's for the betterment of the organization. And what we found is we did that, which was great, and that's one of the things that, by the way, has made us successful is our innovation, but it's also understanding how that innovation hits the everyday employee, right? We call our on-site associates, because there's only so many balls that somebody can juggle, right? There's
so many hours in a day.
Yeah. And like somebody once told me, like, what you can't make it is the flavor of the month, right? From Baskin Robbins, right?
Oh my goodness, so true.
So, and we ran that way for quite a while. A lot of initiatives were being launched, all good ideas, all good initiatives. If we look back to all the initiatives that we did, we have to ask ourselves how many are long-lasting, and how many more should we have long-lasting if we rolled out the initiative the right way? Because everybody wants change. Everybody wants change in their associates and the behaviors that we want. Look, at the end of the day, we want the same type of change, right? I sometimes relate, Chick-fil-A and McDonald's, right? Both great organizations, but if Chick-fil-A bought McDonald's, the employees would need to change, right? And go to the values that Chick-fil-A holds to be true, right? We kind of look at ourselves the same way. We're not going to say we're the Chick-fil-A of property management by any means, and we have our own values and our own culture, which has been top rated. But to do that, we want to make sure that our associates all feel comfortable in being able to live and breathe the values that we hold true to them, and really, at the end of the day, treat our residents with the respect that they really need and deserve, other than treating them like it's just somebody who's coming in to pay rent. Because as a resident, you have so many options for where you get to live at the price points that we're asking for. So we want to make sure that customer service is really high level for the resident.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting because choosing your home is such a personal experience, and then once you're there, feeling, seen and heard and appreciated, and feeling that this can continue to be my home is so important. And that's what I love about when you really talk about what is the experience that you want your renters to have when they're part of your property. And then in order to do that, what does that mean for our employees? So one of the things that I love to, you talked about ice cream. I love ice cream, and I love having variety of ice cream. I mean, I can't always choose, but I see what you're saying as it relates to that variety. We can't have that in our workplaces. We need more consistency. How has the LCD model, or why did you choose the LCD model to help you with those change management initiatives?
Yeah, and I think one of the best responses to that is to help everybody understand on this session is that we were in the same boat that a lot of other people were in. We were the order takers of the change, right? And so if Department A said, hey, we want to add this product, a software, we want our people to be better at sales, we were like, all right, let's do it. And we would be the creators of the PowerPoints, creators of the content. Sometimes after hours, after teaching a class, we're at the hotel plugging away, and I know some of you that listen to this were doing the same thing. And it was one of those things where we had to have a honest conversation of what are we really doing to impact the associates that we have on site, because we would get feedback of, man, we have too many things going on, we can't balance it all. And as an organization, we're like, that's hard. Good luck, right? And so we really pulled back the layers, and I will say, thankfully, we have a really awesome CHRO. Her name's Allison Smith. She came from Publix for 20 years. So when she came to our organization, she was like, okay, and so she has been a champion for our change and allowing for me and my team not just to be a group of order takers, but to really be true identifiers of the needs that are in the company and also the needs that are in each market, because each market is unique or kind of niche in its own way. So resident bases are a little bit different sometimes in markets, and sometimes the director of operations in their market has a specific need, or sales could be a little bit different. So we found that to be a key driver to have a true champion around change. And that would be the first thing I would say to anybody who's listening in going like, what was the first thing? Is find your change champion for your department. Somebody that's going to lift you up, understands learning and development, and can speak to whether it's your CEO or whoever that is to say, this is the why behind the why. And then get yourself a seat at the table to talk about those. And so one of the things that really helped us as we realized, like, man, we need change management here. We met at our annual conference. Thankfully we have an annual conference every year. And we met with pretty much every manager, and we said, hey, there's this thing out there called change, and we're going to try to embrace it. We're going to try to be a better version of ourselves, because that's what we're all about, right? It's, grow together, play as a team, love what you do, let it show. But mainly, one of our values, do the right thing for the right reason, really made us say, like, are we doing the right thing for our associates? So let's add this change piece in. So we met with them all, and we said, hey, we're going to do better. But as we started to identify all the initiatives, it's not like people stopped initiatives, right? So we're like, okay, well, how do we balance that? And how do we move from, again, being the order taker to identify what the reason is for the training need? Because everybody has their desires, but again, those departments, they're great at what they do, right? Our design team is top-notch, beautiful design work. They're not the leaders of learning and development, right? Our marketing team is phenomenal at what they do, probably the best I've ever seen. They're not the leaders of learning and development. The only leaders of learning and development are us, right? The people that are listening to this session right now, and all of us here, right? We're the leaders, so we have to help cater those conversations. That really started for us by first identifying all of our initiatives. And Well, as we opened up Pandora's box, we got like 5. We're like, okay, this is cool. We got this. Like, let's start doing some needs analysis, right? And then we got like 5 more. And then it's like, oh, well, we already have these in pilot. Is that what you call it? Pilot? We're like, oh, yeah. Okay, let's talk about those. Yeah. Today, as a company, we are sitting at about 52.
Wow.
With another 45 on the docket. But that was the first step for us, is tell us what you, department A or B or C, what do you want to do to move the Cortland needle, right? And then prioritizing that by the business need. Is it a liability situation, right? Where if we don't do this, we could get in trouble. Is it a revenue generator for us that's really going to help lift? Or is it really about our resident experience? Because we just can't talk the talk on resident experience. We have to walk the walk. And that means a lot of innovation on resident experience, from how we approach the day-to-day resident from 5 years ago to the new residents coming in today, who's all about technology, right? And so as we identified that, it's then saying, okay, here's where your initiatives lie on this nice and huge calendar to let us then lay out or plan out the proper training content that we need to build, the internal communications we need to have with the teams, right? The promotion of that initiative that needs to happen, understanding how it affects our accounting department, understanding how marketing needs to get involved. And in times past, we never did that. We're like, okay, next one, here we go, right?
Get it done, check it the box, and move on, right? What's so interesting, I feel like that's something that resonates with so many people of, we try to boil the ocean. It becomes, yes, this is working. Okay, let's add 10 more things and 10 more. And then you're sitting there with 56 with 45 on the docket. So I know that you were leveraging the learning cluster design model to manage this change. Why did you choose the learning cluster design model to do that?
Well, I think this is where I was at, and I'm so glad I found it, because our associates move at the speed of light, right? They're in front of residents. They have little time to learn something and then spend like 3 hours trying to learn it, and then that's all they get. And then 3 weeks later go, wait, I think I remember that in a training somewhere, but not have the tools and access. And so we would talk about it all the time. It's like, we're not giving them the right training in the right space when they need it, and at the right time when they need it. And years ago, I had the opportunity to connect with Crystal at an NSA meeting, and this was many years ago. She's like, I have this awesome idea. I'm going to change the world. And I kept saying to myself, I'm going to follow that, just kind of see what happens. Because like, we were all kind of like, with the whole Addie and Sam, it's like there has to be another way. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there had to be another way. And so after a couple of years of trying to figure that out, I heard about Crystal and Lisa's book, All Established. I'm like, okay, I need to start digging into this, learning this. And somebody else I spoke to was like, yeah, you really need to get involved now. And I'm like, this sounds like a great solution. And so we started to go through it. I read through the book, and I was like, I need more. Like, the book was good, but I'm a doer. Like, that's how I learn, is through doing. And so I signed up for the practicum, the multiple week practicum, and it was such a great experience. And I will use this as a moment to say, if you read the book and you haven't signed up for the practicum, now's the opportunity, because you're going to get so much out of it. You're going to get so much from the facilitators, but you're also going to get so much from your cohort and the people that are around you that may not even be in the same industry, but they have so much experience. So definitely recommend that opportunity if you can do it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I completely agree.
And that's when we saw the model, and we saw this big word at the very beginning. It said change on the job behavior. And we're like, that sounds like what we're going through right now, is how do we properly change the on the job behavior versus the whole, as very well coined, the one and done approach that we did for so long, And so as I started exploring that model, I was like, okay, this is the conversation piece. Because we have, and by the way, I have phenomenal instructional designers on my team, like best in class. I've got phenomenal facilitators that work on our team, best in class. Like I would say Cortland has a best in class talent development team. But what we needed was our own common language, our own way to talk through things, right? So because some people would be like, oh, I'm Addie and I'm Sam, but I'm Sam too, right? But what about design thinking? And that's great, but we needed it to start fresh. And so as I discovered this model, started working through it and learning the model, it gave me the opportunity to be like, this is where we need to be as a department.
Yeah, no, completely. So how has it been going? You know, you've got 56 under your belt, 45 on deck.
Yeah.
What's been the experience?
Well, the cool thing is, again, as nothing's ever perfect, right? And that's always a fair thing to say, but what's been great is as initiatives are thought of, we have a seat at the table. We're actually one of the first seats at the table. The goal is they speak to managing directors to say, like, does this really affect the business? Yes? Great. Let's contact Dave. And so we can walk through an initiative planning session to talk about the impact of that initiative. Now, it's not just focused around learning and development, because there's a lot of other things we want to think about inside of the change. It does give learning and development a quick seat at the table. So start thinking through what assets do we need to build, what assets can we use, and really start to incorporate the learning cluster design.
Sure. Yeah, completely. So how specifically has the learning cluster design model helped contribute to that success that you're having?
Yeah, I
even
think,
with the bumps in the road.
Yeah, I would say like everybody's going to find their passions or joys inside of this model. I think at the end of the day, right? And you'll probably look at some things and be like, oh, that reminds me a little bit of this, or that reminds me a little bit of that. I think that's okay. But I think when you put it all together, it gives a holistic approach to what building learning content should be like. Because I think in the past, as a learning and development veteran for, I hate to say it, like over 20 years of my life, I've been through Addie stuff, I've been through Sam stuff, and the depth of all the content that you're trying to put together, not to build out content, but just kind of trying to figure all this out, it becomes overwhelming. And in a space like mine, where we're like, move, innovate, nobody has time to fill out all that stuff. And so what do? We let it go. We're like, man, nobody got time for that? We're going to move on, right? What I really like about this model is, well, yes, it gets in depth. Once you understand it, it's a very holistic format that says, okay, this is where we start. We're going to talk about changing the on-the-job behavior. We're going to have meetings with our clients to talk about what does that really look like from their lens, and crazy enough, how do they want to track that? Because in times we were asked to track it, we're like, we're not the experts of the business, we're the experts of learning, right? So let's ask the experts of the business for what that looks like.
Right. And sorry to interrupt, but that was exactly what was really resonating with me earlier when you were describing what you want your renters to feel as they're there. What is the experience that they have as they're living there, as they're going through the process of choosing to live there? And so tell me a little bit about how you, one, define that, and then how you then got to, and this ties back to a little leading of the strategic performance objective, of then what were those behaviors that you were looking for from your employees in order to get to that business impact of what you want the renters to feel?
Yes, so the strategic performance objectives, which is so huge, what we found to kind of go back into this was that was our internal catalyst for the initiative planning sessions that we labeled. Right? I didn't want to label it a strategic performance objective. I'm just trying to get the departments comfortable, say like, hey, let's talk through this, right? As we're talking through this, in the back of my mind, I'm like, here's the SPO. Here's the SPO. And then as we're defining that and we have a completed session document, I'm going back to the client to say, here's basically now the SPOs that we think that you're trying to hit. Do these match? And it's either a yes or a no, right? And what we're able to do is at that point, it's kind of crazy, but come to a concrete agreement of what can be done and what we just feel can be done.
Sure. What's the reality?
Yeah.
Because we can't do it all. And it's not all going to be fixed at one point in time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I love what you're saying about leveraging the language that the business is already using. And I think that's what some people observe as they're getting into the model is they feel as if it's very rigid and prescriptive. And it's not. It doesn't need to be. You can leverage the philosophy and the guides of each of the actions, but still skin it for what your business needs are and what's most comfortable to them.
Yeah, that's where I totally agree with you. And I think, it depends on how we process information and where everybody's at in the model.
Right.
I think once you get to that point where you've worked through it a few times, and again, the practicum was super helpful because I took a real life situation we were working through and put it into play, and then it gave me a lot of aha moments, right? I don't think just by reading the book would have done that for me.
Sure.
But even to that point, like as I got back to my day to day, it's like, okay, now that I've gotten through this, how do I help my team also understand and embrace this model, right? Because everybody has their own thoughts, perceptions, ideas on learning content. And again, I've got a great group of people, and I don't want to disrupt their thoughts. I want to introduce this as a common language, right? So it was a matter of then coming back into the team and giving them each a copy of the book and saying, like, hey, let's do a book review and let's read this together and talk about it. What I found interesting is that not everybody is passionate reading as I am, which is totally fine because everybody has a life outside of work. But then we put a challenge to each other. We said, hey, we're all working on one unique project, whether it is our funnel lead management training or what was a session we called Cortland Core about resident experience, and other items. And we said, okay, I gave them a copy of what I did in the practicum. I said, take what I have, finish reading through the book, develop your own presentation. And, again, that's one thing I would stress. If you decide to do this, don't say anything negative, right? Because they're going through that learning moment just like you. But it gave us the opportunity to just come in and say, okay, there is a common thread and a common language we can speak through, and understanding what that looks like today. And so understanding that everybody on our team now knows what an SPO is, right? Or everybody on the team now understands that the learner personas really represent, the fact that we probably should do some interviews with our learners to really know what they want versus what we think they want. And probably one of the most powerful pieces to the whole model for us was identifying where the assets fit, whether it was, immediate or social or formal, and how many of our old training was like formal. We're like, wow, we're missing the boat. And now having to adjust, right? And so even for the content we're building, we're using that model to start us off. And then we're actually going to go back through all the material we have created in the past and then run it back through the model and say, okay, how are we hitting the immediate and the social learning tools? Because if we want people to learn at the right space and the right time which they need it, we can't be just formal, one and done type of training.
Yeah, well, and it's truly living the model in the sense that it is iterative. And I think that's one thing that I love, and I'm seeing you are using on your team of you can come in at any point and you can loop back around after the program is done.
Right.
And so one thing I'd love to touch on, we spoke about the beginning, the change of strategic performance objective. Let's jump to the end of the measurement of tracking. So how did you, can you give us an example of how you tracked a single one of those 54 change management of you looked at it from the holistic learning cluster view, as well as maybe an example of how an individual learning asset would have been measured?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, mind you, we're still new to the model, right? And so we're working through it like I think a lot of people are. One of the things we did want to look at this year is our resident liability program and how much a resident pays for liability of the apartment home. Of course, in today's world, when the tragedy happens, it's heartbreaking for everybody, for sure. And, if there's a fire at the community and affects the apartment home, it affects a lot of people. So if I'm living above somebody else and, my apartment catches on fire, when the fire department comes, all that water goes down and it doesn't stop. And so we really wanted to think about how do we protect our residents and protect our communities. And of course the investor relationships we have. And so, we did look at at doing a resident liability payment increase as a small amount. I think the first thing we wanted to look at, and which was a really first big project to roll in the model, was, again, what were the strategic performance objectives? What did we really want out of this? And it made us start to really have a conversation about, well, what's the resident experience going to be? Right? Well, some people are like, oh, okay, it's a $5 difference, it's no big deal. For some people, that $5 difference is a big difference. And so how do you have that conversation with helping that person understand and also give them options besides just our own programs, to help them, connect. Now, mind you, we're not the only company to do this, but it's our approach to take care of the resident. From there, as we went through, we identified, the learners that were going to go through it. We identified the whole surround piece, and we built all the training. We started to ask ourselves, what does the end result look like? How do we know what success looks like? And that conversation really started, though, in the very beginning of the change, on the change model. It wasn't at the very end, like, oh, how are we going to track this again? It was having the conversation with the key department client, say, what does success look like for you? How do you want to monitor this? What does this look like at the end of the day? As that conversation took fruition, it made us realize, like, whoa, we don't have the right departments in play. We need other departments to be in this conversation to make sure everything rolls out smoothly, because the last thing that we want is we roll out a program and then the resident is expecting that $5 increase, but they don't get it because it didn't hit their resident ledger, that kind of thing. And then they're like, I have to, it causes confusion. So we got all the departments into play. We had conversations. We actually built even task management around it to help make sure all those things were done before we even implemented a pilot. And I will tell you, 3 years ago, it would have been like, oh, we rolled this out. Good luck, right? So it really helped us from that conversation in the beginning to pull it back to then track our results that we are looking for.
And the keywords that I heard there was those learner-to-learner differences, and who are your stakeholders? It's not just what do I communicate to the resident, but then also are each of my departments talking? What are their moments of need? What is their context of this information, and what do they need to know so that it all fits together?
Jen, you bring up a great point. It just made me think about that too. The learner-to-learner differences, I think sometimes we think it's the person who's going to get the training. But those learner-to-learner differences are sometimes the departments that are around us that also are affected in those changes that we make.
Completely. Performance support is not in a silo. There are also many processes, tools, interactions throughout our everyday work that are so interconnected. And so when we break down those silos and we think of it big picture of who needs to know about this, and then that's where those variety of learning assets come into play, and that somebody in finance may not need a formal asset. They may not need immediate, social learning, but what they need is a notification that pops up when they're sending out billing. It's like, don't forget this needs to go in for this patient or this resident because they have accepted this terms.
Absolutely.
And so it's that moment of need, but only in that single context. That's wonderful.
And even like for the on-site teams, it's one thing to explain the why, which of course everybody needs to do that. But it's also making sure that they reinforce the how. Because I think we've gone as a learning and development, we're all like, maybe it's Simon Sinek, affected us all, right? Tell them about the why, which is great. But if that why's only get you so far, then be like, okay, I know why, but I don't even know the steps to do this. And then giving them the right tool to do those steps, to make those ledger changes as they need to at the time when they need it. Because if all we do is we go in and we create another virtual session, we're like, here's how you do it. They're going to sit in their offices and be like, that was great. And we're like, oh, snap, now I have to figure it out.
It's just to check the box, and that's not what we're after. That's wonderful. Well, this has been great. I want to leave us with one tip that you have. Here we are at ATD. We're talking to so many leaders who are creating learning content or leading teams with that. What is one tip that you would give to learning leaders who are really wanting to adopt the learning cluster design model and move to that more modern learning solution?
I think it's easy. I think do it. Yeah, like it's hard.
Do it.
It's hard because we're in our day to day, right? We're moving and we have meetings after meetings and all this time that becomes basically a time suck, right? To developing our own team, right? And if we allow that to take precedence over our own development or over our team development, we're not growing the business, right? And if we say we want to be learning leaders, that means we have to invest into ourselves to do it. And so the first thing I would say is actually do it. If you have not read the book, take some time and read through the book. If you're like me, you're like, books are cool, but I want more, I totally recommend the practicum because that did help out a lot to kind of put everything together. And then that helps you and your team have that common language, right? Because one of the things I would say about our team now is when we talk about a strategic performance objective, everybody knows what that is. When we say surround the learner, everybody knows it's like, okay, we have to modernize and we have to build new assets and how do they connect, and a year ago we didn't have that. It's just like, okay, build another eLearn or build another PowerPoint. So it's really hard. So again, as a leader, I would say go for it. Like, don't let it stop you.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, you mentioned the learning assets. You talked about your team who you had offered the book and we said, let's do a book club.
Yeah.
So many times when we're wanting to adopt change and say, hey, let's leverage this new philosophy or model or what have you, we think we forget to leverage the model and the philosophy of how are we gaining the multiple touch points that our practitioners need on our teams in order to move that. And so for some of them, it may be watching videos on YouTube about why this matters or how other teams like it have used it. Some it may be blog articles or case studies. Other it may be a formal course or class. And so those are the wonderful ways, and I love that you're incorporating that with your team, so you're meeting even your team's needs where they are to help bridge that gap. And then the final thing that I really commend you and what you're doing with your team is that it's not meant to be something that's overnight. This is a continuous. You have done immense work. I mean, that is 56 programs with 45 on the docket for change management is huge. And I think a lot of learning leaders feel that weight on their shoulders. And so thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey, and hope that there is for all of us to continue to move, steer the ship forward.
This design model has been a huge impact for me and my team, and if I can spend a little bit of time sharing with everybody else on what that looks like and help them to be able to grow from it, then I'm happy to do it.
That's great. Well, thank you.